You see, I'm new in town, just came to scope it out. I came to find a job, see what Houston's all about. So I checked into a hotel, headed to my room. When my stomach starts growling, better feed me soon. Well, I picked up the phone, I ordered in some food. Turned on the TV, saw this white-headed dude. He was shouting like a madman, looked like Mr. Clean. The next thing he said was,
slime in the ice machine.
I said, slime in the ice machine. He said,
slime in the ice machine.
He said, filthy utensils and roaches on the floor. It's full of food in the freezer, mouse droppings by the door. And
slime in the ice machine. Slime in the ice machine.
He said, slime in the ice machine.
Slime in the ice machine.
He said, slime in the ice machine.
Slime in the ice machine.
He said, slime in the ice machine.
Slime in the ice machine.
That's when I lost my appetite. I crawled into bed. I was so tired of driving, I felt like I was dead. I went right to sleep and I started to dream that it was Friday the 13th and the whole scary team of Freddy Krueger, Jason, and Leatherface. They were there in my room, ripping up the place. There were axes and chainsaws and blood everywhere. So I reached for the remote control there by the chair. I kicked on the set just in time to hear.
Welcome to the Jack Yates Community Forum. I'm your host, Andrea Henson, and today our esteemed guest is Mr. Marvin Zindler for ABC Channel 13. Welcome, Mr. Zindler, to our show.
Thank you.
Now, Mr. Zindler, you've been in Houston's media for over 50 years. You're well respected and well known, but what keeps you fighting for the underdog?
Well, because it's a natural thing to do if you see the type of problems that I see on a day-to-day basis, and of course this is just being a person. That's all.
Okay. Now, you started your broadcasting career as a radio disc jockey. How was the transition from radio to television?
Well, it really wasn't much a transition because radio back in the 40s was really the only way that you could get news. There was no television in 1943, 44, 45, until about 1949 when television first came to Houston, actually 48, and Channel 2, the Houston Post, bought the television Channel 2 from Mr. Lee. It used to be KLEE. When it became Channel 2, that's when I went to work doing the news and being a cameraman at the same time, and I did the crime stuff, and there was only 3 reporters and cameramen, and we were the reporter and cameraman. And of course it was done on film, and we had film processors at the studio, but I didn't work for Channel 2. I worked for Southwest Film Production, which produced the newsreel at 6 o'clock for Channel 2. And of course I worked there until the news director at Channel 2 told our news director over at Southwest Film to keep me off television because I was too ugly.
Okay, you established the Consumer Fraud Division with the Harris County District Attorney's Office, which is still currently operating today.
That's right.
What started you with the Consumer Fraud Division anyway?
Well, the DA asked the sheriff, he needed someone to come in and handle commercial fraud, which is checks. People who give bad checks to wine gardens at that time and Foley's and places like that. And they asked me to come in, and of course they chose me to do it. And I told the DA, I said, wait a minute. If I'm going to do commercial fraud and go after people who are giving hot checks to the merchant, what about the merchant who takes the customer for a ride?
Right.
And they thought about it. So finally, they said, I'll tell you what, we'll take commercial fraud and put it somewhere else, and we'll establish the consumer fraud, and you will do that. So I went in and I established a consumer fraud division. They gave me an assistant district attorney, and I went from there.
Okay. When did you begin at Channel 13?
In January the 1st, 1973. That's 32 years ago.
Ooh, that's a long time. And what was TV like in those days?
Well, it was done on film, and it never changed for me. I kept the same. Doing the same thing, except that I went into something else that really wasn't consumer stuff, and that was to take care of a lot of medical problems that people could not get help from. In particular, going to the county hospital, they just couldn't get that kind of help.
Okay. During your early years at Channel 13, you became nationally renowned for the closing for the LaGrange Ranch, the chicken ranch in LaGrange, Texas, back in 1974. I understand that you received a tip. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, it was 1973 when I
1973.
did the original story on the chicken ranch. Actually, I had just come out of the DA's office. I knew all the assistant DAs there. One of the assistant DAs became an assistant attorney general. The new attorney general, John Hill, was from Houston. He knew who I was. So they got together and found that the chicken ranch and LaGrange and the wagon wheel, which is another house of prostitution in Sealy, they wanted it closed. They called the attorney general, called the district attorney in those counties, and Oliver Kitzman, which we're going to keep the kids. He came back as an assistant as a district attorney just recently. Back in '73, he was a district attorney. Then he became a district judge. But he told the attorney general that this was his problem, and if the people want it closed, they'll close it. So they came to me and asked me to go out and to explore the thing and to put it on television and run them put enough heat on them that they'd have to close down. But let me remind you something. The district attorney, Oliver Kitzman, who eventually became a district judge, then came back and became the district attorney again just recently, and he's the one that wanted to keep the youngsters in Prairie View College from voting.
Oh.
And he's the same guy that I had a rough time with back then. But everybody gets his day, and so I don't think he's a district attorney over there now. He might be, but I don't. He's gone through some rough times, because you're not going to mess with those kids at Prairie View, I can tell you.
All right. Now, some of us can only read about it, but you had hands-on experience in the chicken ranch or whatever. So can you paint a picture on how it was inside?
How the
How did
chicken
it look
ranch?
inside, and like the decoration and all that?
Oh, it was just
the feel of the place?
It was just a plain little house of prostitution, and it wasn't nothing fancy. It was out in LaGrange, actually it was out in the county, and it was nothing. It was just another house, and of course they did a lot of business, and that's about what it was. That's what it was.
So it wasn't really anything fancy to it?
Nothing fancy.
Nothing at all. Okay. A movie was made about the chicken ranch. Were you a consultant with the movie?
No, they didn't want me around on that movie. They really didn't want the part that I actually did. They wanted to play up the sheriff and the madam. The sheriff, of course, in the movie was Burt Reynolds, and Dolly Parton was the madam. They went out of their way and got somebody that was so far from me, was Dom DeLuise, and he played my part. But Universal Pictures didn't want any part of me in that story. They wanted to play up Burt Reynolds and Dolly Parton.
What was your most challenging assignment?
The what now?
What was your most challenging assignment?
You mean in that story?
Or just in general?
Challenging?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think I've had a real challenge in any of my stories that I've done. You know, I used to get upset with people, but if they don't want to be on television, fine. I'll do the story without them.
Okay.
And I've learned that you have to get the facts straight. You better. Some people say that I do a story and I don't ever let facts get in the way of a good story, but that's really not true. I do my homework before I go out and do the story.
Right. How did the whole idea of Slime in the Ice Machine come about?
Well, we had a guy named Burl. He was the chief cameraman in the studio, and every time I would say slime in the ice machine, he would start screaming, slime in the ice machine. And so there was a man who had a little band, and he wrote a song, Slime in the Ice Machine, and he sent it to me, and I thought it was kind of funny. And of course he was showing his son a gun, a shotgun, and he pulled it out of the closet. The gun went off and killed him. And I wanted to do something for the guy, so I called his wife and told him I'd like to use that Slime in the Ice Machine at the end of my stories. So she said okay, and so that's why I've done the Slime in the Ice Machine.
You are worldly known for being a very charitable person. What is your favorite charity and why?
My
favorite charity?
My favorite charity?
Mm-hmm.
I don't pick out charities too much. I have a charity that I do for the Houston Eye Associates and Houston Ear Research Foundation, and we have an Agris Zindler Foundation for children. But I don't like to use the money on these charities. I like for people, the doctors themselves, to give of their time, the hospitals to give of their time, and that's what I've been able to do. I don't go for these charities that have executive secretaries and executives, and they pay all these big salaries, and they have very little money left over for the charity. So I'm very careful. That's why I have Marvin's Angels, so we don't have to use charity.
Okay. You've been honored for your openness and honesty in talking about numerous subjects, including your personal life. Why are you so forthcoming about this?
Because I don't want you going around telling somebody. If somebody wants to know, I'll tell them. So
right.
I decided there's no secrets if you tell a secret.
Right.
It really upsets people because they don't
have nothing to talk
they don't
about.
have anything to talk about.
Marvin, you have a very distinctive look. The white tie, the blue glasses, the blue shirt. What is that all about? How did that begin?
I came from a clothing family.
Okay.
My family owned, my father owned Zindler's. We had, I think, 5 department stores around in Houston and in San Antonio. And I didn't like the retail business, but I had enough of it to learn how to dress, so that's where I got my dressing from. I just didn't. I came from a clothing family. That's the reason.
Okay. After graduating from Tarleton Agricultural College in Stephenville, Texas, you went into the Marines during World War II. How was World War II in the Marines for you?
Well, I didn't see any action in the Marine Corps.
Didn't? Okay.
And I didn't graduate from Tarleton. I went there for a year, and then I got married. I lied about I lied when I got into the Marine Corps that I wasn't married, because in those days you couldn't be married to go into the service. And I really didn't see any action. I ended up being discharged and belonging to the Marine battalion here in the State Guard, and I was a drum major of the band.
Hey.
So I really was. It was a tough war for me.
Okay.
But I did lose my brother. We were 5 of us in service at the same time, and one of my brothers was killed in World War II in the Battle of the Bulge with General Patton's army.
Okay. What are your thoughts on the state of television today, such as reality TV?
I don't like reality TV. It's kind of a phony deal. It's really not. It's just another fad that will not go on very long.
Okay.
I mean, it's okay. It's people like it, fine, but I don't like reality TV.
Do you think there is more sensationalism in news coverage today?
Really, it's really not. It's the news itself that's become very sensationalism. I am one of those who like sensationalism in news, but it's no longer that any longer. You don't have to be. You don't have to do news in sensation. All you got to do is do it.
Okay.
And the news itself is so bad. You know, a crazy guy puts his truck on the railroad track, going to commit suicide, and he jumps out of his car, and the train hits it in California and kills a whole bunch of people. That's sensational. We didn't make that story. That story was actually real. It's just, now, sensational is when a woman kills her husband. And the headline is, she killed him because she loved him. That's sensationalism.
Okay.
But when you talk about what was going on right now with soldiers getting killed in Iraq, and the Iraqis are getting killed, and we report it, that's, you don't have to be much sensational on that.
It's real.
Particularly when all this stuff happened in Asia. It was very, very sad. 200,000 people dying.
What kind of advice do you have for students in media and journalism classes who would like to pursue a career in broadcast journalism?
Well, number one, learn your computer, because everything is computerized. Learn to type, not like this, but learn to type. That's the only thing I learned that I didn't fail in, is typing. Try to be an intern at one of the stations, and after you become an intern, decide what you're going to be. Either you're going to be a producer, or you're going to be in front of the camera. And you go to a very small station. Lufkin is a very small station, Beaumont, any of these little small stations, and get at least 2 years behind you in these little. Then you graduate to a bigger station like San Antonio, any of the Austin, Tyler. Those are. Then you get into those media stations. Then you try to get into a station like our station, or Dallas, or any of the 3 stations here in Houston, or 4 stations here in Houston. That's the way you really get into television. And I might add that there's a tremendous lack of black talent in television.
That's where I'm going to come in.
That really needs to come by.
Yeah.
That's one of the problems I see today.
And why do you think that is?
They've never been really given a chance.
Okay.
Never really given a chance, and they just don't. They have to start in a small station. You just cannot walk into a station that's the 10th station like we are, and just walk in and say, I want a job. I mean, it's just tough deal. We have to take these people from small stations, and that's the way you get it.
So what has kept you in television for so many years?
The love of what I do, and believe me, I'm stupid to stay at my age at 83 going on 84. I enjoy playing golf. I have a home in Palm Springs and one in Las Vegas and one here. I've been able to save my money, but I'm not using it, and I'm not using myself to be able to enjoy what I like to do. But I like what I do, and I said, well, I've got a lifetime contract. I got that back in 1988.
Okay.
And I just like to get up and go to work, and that's it. I get enough golf. I get enough vacation time there now. They've been nice to me.
Besides working in television, what else would you see yourself doing?
Fitting people up in a suit of clothes and selling them.
Okay.
That's
Family
about
tradition.
that's the only two things that I know. Or being law enforcement, of course.
enforcement.
I love law enforcement. I was the first white cop to ride with a black cop, and that black cop became the first U.S. Marshal in the United States. The first U.S. Marshal. His name was Coney.
Okay.
And you learned. I was very careful with this guy, and I made him. He had to be. It's easy because if you're a certain color, you could think you can go out and beat up on that one because they are the same. And I told him you can't do that. And I pretty well cautioned him about that all the way through. And that's when he became the U.S. Marshal. That President Carter appointed him as U.S. Marshal.
Can you describe the event when the Fayetteville sheriff attacked you and broke one of your ribs?
Well, that was 18 months after the closing of the chicken ranch. And he kept complaining, and all the people up there were complaining that LaGrange lost a lot of business because all those girls are no longer there, and they're not buying clothes and all that kind of stuff. So I went there right in December, and the town was just buzzing. It was just busy as everything. And the sheriff found out that I was there, and he came around to my car, which I didn't know, and I had a vest on, and he grabbed that vest and started banging myself up, trying to get me out of the car, banging me up. And he broke my ribs, and finally he let me go, and I took off, and that's how I got my ribs broken.
Okay.
But he's dead now.
He's dead? Oh.
Yeah, he died. I sued him.
You sued him.
And they made a settlement, and I gave my money to a charity, and that was it.
Okay. Since you are such a busy man helping those in need in Houston as well as other cities, what do you do in your leisure time? You said you like to golf. Anything besides golfing?
Well, I play golf. I like to go places sometimes to dance with my new wife. I was married for 56 years when my wife passed away, and I waited about 6 years and got remarried. And she plays golf, and we play a lot of golf, and we dance. We go out to eat. Of course, I've kind of made her a cook now. She's a housewife, so she's being domesticated.
Okay.
But she wasn't very domesticated when I met her because she was married to a person who liked to go out all the time to eat. I don't like to go out.
Like home cooking?
I like home cooking.
Me
that's
too.
Right.
Okay, so do you ever want to retire?
I say I don't ever want to retire. I said I'd never get remarried. I said
and you
I'd
did
never. So I can't say I never would. I mean, hell, I'm getting to the point where I'm supposed to be dying. You get so old, and either you live to be 100 or you live to be 82, 83, 70, or 80. And I guess if I retire, maybe I would probably die. But I like doing what I do, and there could be the time. I wouldn't say never. I've thought about it, but then when I want to, they tell me, no, just go ahead and take some time off. And they make it very difficult for me to retire.
Mm-hmm. You're helping so many in need. I guess they need someone like you.
Well, we're trying to train a young man to try to do some of the stuff
that you do.
I don't think, it's tough. unless you've been in here a long time, you've got to have that feeling, and I don't know whether young people have that feeling. They have to have a different feeling. They have to be almost to the point where they're about to die themselves in order to help other people. It's hard for young people to understand that. They cannot understand how I can still be on these young people right in this studio cannot understand how an old guy can still be on television. You can't comprehend age.
Right.
Gosh, when you're 18 years old, you think someone 30 years old is old.
Oh.
When someone becomes 40, they think, oh my goodness, I'm 40 years old. That's midlife. And then they get to be 50, and they're already thinking about joining the AARP for the old people.
Yeah, get the
and
discounts.
thinking about, well, only 12, 15 years, I'm going to get Social Security. And you know, you can't comprehend age.
Right.
Young people cannot. And when a young person gets into my job, I don't know. I hope they can do a good job. I do.
Okay. Now, I hear you're pretty good at twirling the baton, and I am Andrea Henson, the captain of the twirling squad here, and I happen to have a baton here, so maybe after we finish this interview, or even now, you can show me what you have. See if you still got it.
Well, when I twirl the batons used to be this big.
Yeah.
Now they've come down to this, and you just don't lose it. It's all in timing, and it's just like anything else. I play a flute and a piccolo, and you just can't pick up a flute and piccolo and play it.
Right.
And not everybody can pick up one of these things and know what they're doing with it.
Okay.
But it's all in timing, and the older you get slow, but you don't. Your baton gets slower, but you don't lose the rhythm.
Okay.
And I'm going to tell you, the greatest baton twirler I think I've seen, I think Calvin Murphy is probably the best I've ever seen, and I've been around a long time.
He is good.
And he's a good guy.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Zindler. This is the Yates Community Forum. I'm your host, Andrea Henson, but before you go, you have to do the Marvin Zindler Eyewitness News for us. You have to do it.
Well,
right here.
I have enjoyed this interview, and I hope to see a lot of these well, I can't see them because I won't be around long enough, but I would hope that these youngsters in this class will end up in big-time television. Marvin Zindler, Eyewitness News.
Thank you. Until next time.
Slime in the ice machine. Slime in the ice machine.
He said slime in the ice machine.
Slime in the ice machine.
He said slime in the ice machine.
Slime in the ice machine.
He said slime in the ice machine.
Slime in the ice machine. Roaches, roaches. Mouse dropping. Mouse dropping. Rats. Rats. Marvin Zindler. Roaches. Roaches. In the ice machine. Mouse droppings in the ice machine. Rats in the ice machine.